Well, certainly our home for college basketball is the Atlantic Coast Conference here on the North Carolina Sports Network. David Glenn, you've been covering ACC basketball for 38 years. Kerry Keating, you've coached in the ACC, also been a head coach. You've been all around the nation on the sidelines. So who better than you two to give us your midseason point ACC Coaches of the Year candidates? David, let's start out with you.
Yeah, well, I know who usually wins this award. And the way it usually goes is people look at the preseason media predictions, and then whatever team finished more slots higher than what they were predicted to finish, that coach gets the honor. I'm not saying that's not one thing we should all consider, but I think it places too much weight on what the media voted back in the preseason. I kind of take a more holistic view of the whole thing. And here are my two top candidates right now. One would be more conventional than the other. Pat Kelsey of Louisville deserves a lot of credit because he took over at a prestigious program, Louisville, multiple national champions in men's basketball, of course, historically. But the Cardinals had two of the worst seasons in the history of the program in the immediate past prior to his hiring away from the College of Charleston. Pat Kelsey had an entire roster turnover. Not 5 players leaving, not 6, not 7. 13 scholarship players out, 13 scholarship players in. He essentially has been asked to microwave a basketball team, and that is what he has done. They have role players like Rain Smith, a guy who followed him from College of Charleston, is one of the best three-point shooters in the ACC. They got a 3-year starter from Wisconsin named Chucky Hepburn to be their starting point guard. And I watched him play for the Badgers. What Pat Kelsey has Chucky Hepburn doing has brought out the best. He was good for the Badgers. He is great for the Cardinals. When you can microwave a basketball team and get all these guys, many of whom were stars at their previous school. Not all of them, but many of them were the guy at their previous college, as he had to restock his roster with all major college transfers. When you have to ask 6 or 7 the guys, you have to ask most of them, if not all of them, to just blend in. And you do it successfully to the point that here at midseason, Louisville is 12-5 overall, 5-1 in the ACC, second place in the conference standings. They beat Indiana earlier this year. They beat West Virginia in non-conference play. They beat Carolina convincingly in Louisville earlier this year. They beat the Clemson Tigers. They beat Pitt. Other than Duke, 3 of the best teams in this league are Carolina, Clemson, and Pitt. And Louisville has gone 3-0 against that group so far. So given what he inherited, given the massive turnover, given the positive chemistry, off the charts positive chemistry Pat Kelsey has helped cultivate, and given that he's going to finish high in the standings after being picked middle, I think, in the standings. I'd have to double check the exact number. Middle third, I would guess. Pat Kelsey is one of the leading candidates for ACC Coach of the Year. I'll be briefer on the second one because I mentioned a lot of this earlier. This is the more unconventional one. How many times did either Dean Smith or Mike Krzyzewski or Roy Williams or one of the greatest coaches of our time have an insanely good team and an insanely good season, and they were ignored in the Coach of the Year balloting, and it was always on the logic, well, they have the most talent. They should win, right? Well, there's a difference between winning because you have the most talent and then reaching a point of dominance or one of these historic records. And we're only at the midseason point, so I'm not ready to crown anybody yet. But Duke deserves credit, and John Shire deserves credit beyond the fact that he had another number 1 recruiting class, beyond the fact that he's going to have the National Freshman of the Year in Cooper Flagg and the ACC Player of the Year in Cooper Flagg. They're 6-0 in conference play. They're 14-2 overall. Their only losses were to really good teams, Kentucky and Kansas, that are going to end up, high in the national rankings. They're playing some of the best defense in the entire country. What do you often hear? It's hard to play great team defense, especially with freshmen, because most freshmen weren't taught very well at their previous level. Well, Duke is elite defensively with the help of a lot of freshmen in the rotation. Duke is also elite offensively. They're the only ACC team and one of the few nationally that's in the top 10 of the offensive efficiency rankings and the top 10 of the defensive efficiency rankings. Those are just some of the numeric reasons. Earlier in the show, I mentioned the emotional, the psychological, the agenda-driven reasons. Jon Scheyer is tremendously respected by those players. And when Jon Scheyer tells Tyrese Proctor he's not going to be the starting point guard anymore, Tyrese Proctor accepted it and has improved his outside shooting and is helping in other ways. He demoted Caleb Foster. He convinced Malik Brown of Syracuse to transfer in, even though Malik knew he would have a secondary role. He convinced Sion James to transfer in from Tulane, where Sion was the man, capital letters, the man, and he has to be a secondary player. Why? Because Cooper Flagg is there, and Kamen Malawach is there, and Con Knippel is there. And if you're going to come to Duke, you've got to be ready to be a supplementary, complementary player rather than the superstar that you were at Tulane or Syracuse or wherever. Mason Gillis of Purdue in a different way. I think Jon Scheyer on the court has gotten maximum effort. Jon Scheyer on the court already has the Devils hitting on all cylinders offensively and defensively, which is hard at midseason, especially when you have so many new guys and so many young guys. Again, Jon Scheyer probably won't win ACC Coach of the Year because he was picked to finish first, and you can't finish higher than first. But I think if the guy goes, 18-2 in the ACC, given everything I just described, X and O wise, effort wise, results wise, agenda management wise, I think he, along with Pat Kelsey, which should be at least at midseason here, the top two candidates for ACC Coach of the Year.
Well said, David. No arguments at all. Nothing really to add to that thoroughness other than in the midseason, if we're just going to throw another third party, if you will, into the vote here, just go down the standings and add Brad Brownell. And simply from the fact that he had a team in the Elite Eight last year, not a traditional basketball powerhouse, if you will, not the Duke Carolinas of the world, not even the Louisvilles of the world, and right back in with only one loss in the league, albeit to Louisville. Brad's one of those guys that every year up until last year, everyone in the coaching circles thought, well, he won't be there anymore. And here he is in his 15th year at Clemson. Now with the moving on of a lot of coaches in the league, the elder statesman of the league, if you will, and doing what he needs to do by winning. And although winning more of his games at home than on the road, obviously, by way of percentage, a team that has certainly put himself right in the squirrely of the NCAA mix as we head into the mid-January point to decide who's going to have a chance to be there. And Brad has certainly done that. And kudos to Brad for, coming over the top and being one game away from a Final Four. I mean, that's a hard act to follow at a school that's traditionally not there every year. I think Brad deserves a little bit of mention, although very, very difficult to get a mention with those two guys for all the reasons you pointed out, David. Rightfully so for both Pat and for John. We'll see if it holds up. We'll see in a month or two if it holds up, but I have a feeling that we'll be kind of having the same conversation once we come around to the end of the season, once the ACC tournament pops up.
It's funny. Brad was the other guy on my mind, so I'm glad I didn't steal all your thunder, Coach. I appreciate that.
It's not a lot to choose from, so we gotta share the wealth here. But I appreciate you laying it out so eloquently. And we talked about this too, just to come over the top a little bit on John. And I know having been on Coach of the Year staffs before as an assistant. How much you put into making that coach successful. And I know when coaches get Coach of the Year awards, it's a staff award. The interesting thing to me, and it can't be overstated with how John has handled this talent inflection, both with the freshmen and the transfer class and doing it at a high level, is the non-basketball staff that they have, which in this day and age is going to become so much more relevant, so much more important to success. It's going to require relationship management of a different level. Anytime you follow a legend or someone that has their name on the floor, even, that's usually the buffer for the next guy. It happened at Arizona. It happened at UCLA. We can go on and on. This speaks volumes to obviously what Coach K built and instilled. And it wasn't necessarily a Bill Guthridge type buffer, if you will, at Carolina. But clearly they knew something. Clearly John knows something. I remember recruiting John as a high school player when I was, I think, at Tennessee at the time. He was a high school player up in Chicago and Illinois. Not a surprise, but really, really impressive how he's managed this team while also coaching it. And that's exactly what coaches are going to have to become moving forward. Not just game coaches, but people managers of the highest standard outside of your roster, because you're going to be managing an entire corporation, if you will, as college basketball becomes more and more professionalized.
The Lawson Insurance Group in Raleigh is a family-owned business led by 3 actual brothers who happen to be huge sports fans: Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. I know these guys, I trust these guys, and I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. The next time you have insurance needs, I hope you'll do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and support for you as their client. To learn more, search Lawson Insurance Group online. The Lawson Insurance website will be the first link that pops up.